a Skype interview with Mohammad Zafar on walking away from suicide. Welcome, close shavers, to another episode. Today I've got a unique format in how we're delivering this. It's like a Skype interview that I got with a dear brother. I've not met him yet, but he feels like a friend. Subhanallah, you get that connection sometimes. His name is Mohammad Zafar. He's from Toronto, Canada. And in light of the 10th of October, which was World Mental Health Day, on the 10th of October, just gone, a few days ago, and also the poem that I wrote about suicidal Muslims, I thought this would be a great and perfect opportunity for us to interview Mohammad Zafar and discuss, his experiences with mental health. Before, I don't want to ruin his story. We can really get into that, and I'll allow him to share that and share his journey with us. Without further ado, welcome, assalamu alaikum, Mohammad Zafar from Toronto.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for the really kind introduction.
No, anytime. Thanks, and thanks for coming and joining us today with this Skype talk. I'm gonna basically describe to the viewers and the listeners how is it that I came across your stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sounds
I was doing research on mental health, suicide, etc., because it's something that's affected my life personally, and dear and loved ones around me. And then I thought, well, what's it like in, for example, our community, the Muslim community? It's such a taboo subject, right? That we don't really talk about a lot. It's a very controversial subject too. And then I come across your stuff and your video actually on YouTube, on your channel, which I believe was uploaded like 1st of July 2013. So it's just over 5 years now. And after that, I listened to that and I heard your journey. After that, I came across your article on Muslim Matters. About your experience about being suicidal one time of your life in a certain stage, and I found I don't want to go into too much detail because I believe that's your right to share that, and it's going to be so much more powerful coming for yourself. But was it in that order, in the order that I kind of discovered you? Was it the YouTube talk video first and then the article? Which way was it?
So originally I posted it on my blog, and I was hemming and hawing for like maybe months whether I should even upload it or not. I probably wrote the whole thing over a course of like several months, and I never uploaded it. And so it started as journaling, and then I just sort of increased a bit more, and then I decided then I would just share it with the world. I would upload it onto YouTube, the video, which I didn't really talk. I thought maybe the article could do sort of more of the talking. And I uploaded the article to my blog. Muslim Matters, I believe it was some months after, I can't remember when I sent my article into them. And they were kind enough to upload it, and they broke it up in 3 parts. Yeah,
of course. Oh, yes, you're right. It was 3 parts, yeah. Okay, that's deep. And then what was the response like? The feedback?
Immediately. I mean, I got a lot of supportive messages coming on the article. The article did, fairly well. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I think right now it's received like well over 25,000 views. I don't know how many you have actually read it, but
they give you those stats. They give you those stats, right?
Yeah, and then I'm not sure about the stats on Muslim Matters.
20,000 views you got, right? And that was after how long of uploading it?
I uploaded it 2013 as well.
Okay, both.
Yeah, both of them.
Okay, yes. So it was the article on Muslim Matters, and then it was the video on YouTube.
Correct. Yeah, and I uploaded them. The one I uploaded to my blog was simultaneous with the YouTube video, and then Muslim Matters some months after. I had to edit it quite a bit, but that was a few months after, I believe.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it must have been a bit daunting, right? Because first, it takes a lot of courage, and I commend you for that, mashallah, that you had the courage to write and express your story and your journey, especially a lot of pain involved. and then to get response and to get the views and get the comments, because there's a lot of comments on that video as well, right? And also I believe on the article, on the 3-part article, Muslim Matters, you can comment on that. What was it like? What were the comments that stuck out the most for you?
I think quite a few. There was one on my blog that a person, I think it was either on my blog or they emailed me, but they said something along the lines of, and this was my goal when I wrote the article. I wrote it in 2013. This is a time when I was out of work, out of school, and I just grew up always thinking that, you need a good job or you need a good education. You need something tangible that's going to bring you happiness. And I wrote that, I reached a point in my life in 2013 where I didn't really have any of that, but I had a lot of contentment in my heart, a lot of peace. And I intentionally uploaded the article then because I didn't want to end the article with, now that I have a job, now that I have a degree, I feel I'm much better. I wrote it before I did any of those things because I wanted people to know that. And so there was one email where I can't remember who sent it, but someone sent an email along the lines of, what I really liked about your story is that, you didn't really reach any of those things, but you started doing a lot better. And
Right.
I wanted to just instill that point because I know it's really, something that stuck with me, and I wanted to instill that with others that you shouldn't wait, to have something good come into your life.
Yeah.
And I wrote this in the articles, some words along the lines of things didn't necessarily change. I changed a lot. So that was really nice, that comment.
I mean, it's funny because I was speaking about the article and the YouTube video, but I've not actually given the title yet. The title of the YouTube video that you uploaded is how I walked away from suicide, right? How I walked away from suicide, and I think in brackets it's like a Muslim brother's struggle with depression. So, I mean, what struck out for me was a lot of it was during your childhood, right? What can you say and share about that?
Right. So well, the depression built up over many years. And of course, at the time I didn't know about it. Like I remember going through high school and, in retrospect, I can look back at it and I can define those terms a little bit easier now. I think there's a lot more mental awareness now than there used to be, or awareness about mental health, sorry. But I had definitely anxiety attacks. I had a lot of social anxiety. I had general anxiety disorder, maybe. And I definitely had depression. I was never officially diagnosed, but
Okay.
I just remember I used to feel like something doesn't feel right, or I just wasn't able to get things done. I had very low energy. And so, yeah, a lot of those things, they sort of built up. Um, and I never really knew why. With my childhood, you always look for reasons, I think. And so when we came from Pakistan when I was about 5, 6 years old, and that was, we came to Toronto, Canada then. And things were, just like any first generation migrant, we're getting used to the new culture, new language, and so forth. I had surgery when I was about 6 years old, I believe, and there was a mistake made in the surgery, and so my nose, which is well, it's fine right now,
Okay,
but yeah.
it's
So I
nice and
had
straight,
surgery.
man. Mine's crooked, man. Mine's,
It's well,
okay.
so when I was about 6, the surgery was there was a mistake in the surgery, and so
Right.
the cartilage was missing, in the front of my nose. And so it was, I had surgery again at 13, but from
Okay.
basically 6 to 13, I was, pretty easy target for
Right.
anyone looking to make fun. And so this was pretty constant at school. And then, of course, those, extended family dinners, weddings. I used to really, try to avoid those places because I'd have to answer the same old questions again, or sometimes the
Right.
worst thing was like just getting looks and no words. Though, that used to really bother me when I was young. And
Right.
you get used to like the looks, I guess, or the comments. But it's really hard to get used to the pain that comes with it.
Okay. So, I mean, so immediately after that, do you feel that that's when you start getting that kind of unwanted attention and, the looks and possibly, it's I believe it was the bullying, right, at school?
Yeah, I was never aware of it until, people kept bringing it to my attention. And then, I'd sort of let it go. And then when it became so constant, that's when it was really hard for me to ignore it.
How old were you
Uh,
then?
I had surgery when I was
Hmm.
6,
Hmm.
and I think I became really aware when I was around 8 years old.
Okay.
You get a bit older and so forth, and then kids notice more things. And kids are pretty superficial, right?
Yeah.
I remember still like they used to be everyone used to look at a kid wearing like the Nike sneakers and stuff those days. I think it's still the same. So
Yeah, that's not changed.
yeah, some things remain the same.
Yeah.
So so yeah, that's when I sort of became aware of it. Uh, Comments, and then you also become so hypersensitive in one way. I remember once, I was walking to school, and then like two or three girls walked past me, um, and uh, and they just started laughing, and then maybe they're thinking about something else and they're laughing, but then
Mm.
I always used to just like, I think it's me, is it me? And it's still something I kind of have to work on
So
even after all these years.
yeah, I agree. You become very self-conscious, right? I'm
Yeah.
borderline paranoid,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's something difficult to deal with. And I mean, also, was it the fact that it was quite apparent that you were from a different country? How was your English then at the time? I'm guessing you learned pretty quick, right? But kids pick up the smallest of things. They pick up the accent, the foreign accent, the look, everything, right? I mean, they're geniuses, and they're so, how they have a knack for kind of, kind of noticing this intricate details and any kind of abnormalities as they presume they may be, right? And then they pick at them. And schools, I mean, we know, I mean, so much bullying takes place at schools, and children can be really mean, man. Kids can
Yeah,
be mean.
no, there's no question. That's
Mm.
true.
So after that, what was your journey then? I mean, because you're 8 now, and you're noticing all these comments and triggers, if you like, for you to.
Yeah, I think it definitely started to get worse. What happened really in the middle was I would try extra hard to fit in. So I would sometimes like bring toys to school to give to like people so they'd be friends with me and so forth.
Mhm.
And just, trying different things to like be accepted. And I think I do remember one incident when I was around maybe 11 or 12. Long story short is I would always just try to fit in, do whatever I could. And I was at a cousin's place. So, one of his friends came, said something, directing it at me. And then I sort of, returned the favor. We're exchanging our, grade 5 vocabulary insults.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
And
course.
then at that point, I went inside, and they would come back. They were like, "Oh, you can come back. It's okay." But I just remember being so exhausted, and I really, really got tired of just trying to fit in, and that was like the start of like just really going into like antisocial behavior. I just I thought the effort I'm putting in to fit in is not worth everything that's coming with it. So maybe it's just easier if I just stay in my room. And
Right.
I just started to do that. I became very antisocial. I grew a lot of hatred for the world, and I just thought there's nothing good for people like me. And so, I had to sort of be this way. At that time, my dad had already passed away, and
Okay.
I
Sorry
was
to hear that.
around, yeah, I was around 11, I believe,
And your father passed
12.
away.
Yeah, and so the bullying was continuing, and so it became really difficult, and I was more comfortable just being by myself, and so that really wasn't good, and it really built up. But that started in around 11, 12, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that must have been difficult, right? I mean, losing your father as well at such a young age. Was it what, if you don't mind me asking, what was the cause of the death?
It was cancer. It happened really fast too. So he became very ill in around June 2000, and that illness lasted maybe a couple of months, so about 3 months, and then by August 20th, I believe, he passed away, and it was just surreal. I didn't know people could even die. I was very young that time, but I mean, I was never too close with him because I met him when I was a bit older. He was my dad, of course, but we were never really too close. But I would definitely really miss a male presence after that because it wasn't too easy growing up, without any male role model. But that added to my challenges.
Indeed, I mean that's definitely, I mean that itself is a calamity, right? And a huge setback, and when we're speaking about mental health and depression, and you go to that dark place, these are just like further triggers for your mental state to get worse, and it exacerbates it. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, I picked up. You mentioned, when you kind of secluded yourself after that event at your friend's house, right? At 11 or 12, you said you felt exhausted, but you also said something which is quite interesting, that no one will understand me, right? This place isn't for me, if you like, or no one, this people or the world won't understand me. That's quite a common, theme, that I find actually, that a lot of people feel, especially those that do think even later on of, suicide, that they feel that there's no hope for them. I mean, when they say hopeless and people say we feel hopeless, I think the meaning of that is also that no one will ever understand what I go through. So what's the point? I mean, it's a complete feeling of isolation and loneliness, right? I mean, at that age as well, I can only imagine it must have been really, really tough.
So at 11, 12, I didn't even know what suicide was. It was completely like this foreign concept for me. I would learn later on, like, people take their own lives, and I was sort of, amazed at that. Like, how does someone come to do that? Which is a really naive way of thinking, but, I remember the way I used to think, and that was sort of constant. But I do remember giving up, and I do remember not feeling like, I could really fit in anywhere. Granted, I was pretty young, but it became a more, I think, it felt to me at least, a more viable option was to completely isolate myself, and just stay in my room, because no one could really push me out from there, and I wouldn't have to put in any effort and then be completely turned down. Basically, I was facing constant rejection at a very young age.
That's the word that came to my mind, actually, the rejection. Yeah.
And so I just, you can't help but blame yourself after a while. Like, a problem has to be me because, I'm not doing something right. And what was really tough for me was I knew what the issue was. I couldn't necessarily change the way I looked, and so I just had to kind of be like that. At age 13, I had surgery. The issue was gone at least, and anyone I met after that would have no idea about what had happened before. But that time, I felt like I felt really sort of damaged, so to speak, and I wasn't necessarily the best kid at school. I was in an Islamic school, but not necessarily easy to deal with, I'd say. And I just felt like, well, I've got to, talk back to people, and I've got to let them know. And I would have no problem using, all sorts of language back at teachers and so forth, which, if they're watching, I'd like to apologize to them. But yeah, I think, you can really go down that route, especially if you don't know and realize that there is an alternative. You just think that this is my world and that's it. And so, you go down a very dark path, unfortunately.
I mean, that was a lot. That's obviously a lot for you to take at the time from, the constant bullying about your appearance, being constantly self-conscious, the rejection that you felt as well, that, well, if it weren't, I'm trying everything, it's not working out, people still got a problem with me, then clearly it's me, right? And then with your father as well passing, not having that that male kind of role model. When do you feel then you kind of hit rock bottom after that?
I don't know if I felt like I hit rock bottom. In high school, what ended up happening, like I mentioned earlier, was I didn't know what was going on, of course, like the medical terms for it, or the mental health terms for it. But I was, waking up in the middle of the night. I was having really strong anxiety. And I was never really like an emotional person, but it was like, I can't explain it. It was like I'd wake up and it just like something is just like piercing through like my heart, and I would just like end up crying profusely for hours on end until I was just so exhausted I'd fall asleep. And this was happening often. I'd say like at the worst it was like maybe once or twice a week, and I had no idea what was going on. And so that that was happening at one end, and Islamic school was nice. Like we had Muslim teachers, but they really had no idea. They just saw me as like a rude kid, like a troubled teenager sometimes. And what I learned is it's really relevant to ask a question of why. So if someone's behaving in a certain way, um, you know, someone who's intelligent is going to realize I've got to ask why. Why are they doing this? Because if someone had asked me why, I don't know if I would have an answer, but it would definitely sound like they weren't judging me, and they would want to hear what's going on. And
That's
so, but
interesting.
yeah.
That's
So that was happening in high school, and yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I think that's the first time I started like thinking, well, like there is no point living like this. Like,
hmm
I'm not really getting good grades. I was barely showing up for classes at
hmm
that time.
hmm
And that's the first time I started thinking about, taking my own life.
It's quite shocking, to be honest, because it's not every day you meet someone or you talk to someone and they tell you quite frankly and honestly that, I thought about taking my own life. And, it takes a lot to admit that. I mean, when I read your article, it had an impact because suicide is something that has affected my life personally, as I mentioned, which is one of my closest friends. When did you reach that point then exactly? That, okay, you felt this is enough. Enough is enough.
Yeah, I think, to be accurate, I never planned to go through with it.
Okay.
But I did seriously ponder it.
Okay.
So I guess like a slight
Okay.
difference in that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Which again,
And
there's stages, right? Because some people, from what I remember from my friend, it started as an idea, a thought, a conviction, and then actively seeking it out. Which I don't want to go into, but I guess you were maybe at stage one, like.
I could never get to planning because we grew up, alhamdulillah, in a fairly practicing home. What I mean by that is just being reminded of Allah constantly. And I had good siblings, mother, good brother-in-laws as well,
Mhm.
that were very close to their faith. And so I grew up and just hearing lectures in the background, Quran on in the house. And I was always very I felt being very isolated. I felt in a strange way very connected with Allah. And I was 15, 16, so, and not really that close to my faith. But I just knew one thing. I didn't want to die and then go and meet Allah like this. I just felt like my creator always had my back when it came to having no support at all. Being without my dad, having my mom just so overwhelmed with her own troubles in the beginning, losing her husband and so forth, and then trying to figure out what to do with her kids. And then not really feeling like I had support from friends, and feeling, to be very honest, like feeling very let down by friends, which is like, it's not to put too much, pressure on them, um, but just I didn't feel like I had that, and I did feel like I had something with my creator, and so I just couldn't convince myself that, taking my life would be the best way to go and meet him.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
and
Right.
and this is someone who wasn't really too close to his faith,
So,
so I
but
was like,
you were still God conscious, right, from a young age?
yeah, and I, I would think about it, and I would like come up with ideas of how I could do it. And then I was like, no, but I can't, like I tried to rationalize it as much as I could. And I could never do it. And so at that point I'd stop. And so this back and forth went on for quite a while. And then I sort of came to a decision, and I'm like, I can't do this. This is wrong. Um, and, maybe Allah will help me. And life is interesting, because I made a decision not to take my life.
Mm-hmm.
Things weren't roses after that. I mean, it was still very challenging.
Of
Like
course.
it was a bit disappointing because I thought, well, I made a good decision, so I should see good things come towards me, and that didn't necessarily happen. So I had more of those sleepless nights. Um, and then I would just start like going on long walks, which sounds weird, but I just literally, I would walk around, the city of Toronto, going nowhere, and then when I was just really tired, I'd come back.
How old
And
were
it
you
was,
then?
I was in high school, maybe
Okay.
16, 17, yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so I just thought, I was just very desperate at like almost looking for like a figurative staircase, somewhere I could go to, someone could tell me do this or do that, and it'd make a little sense. I had no idea, how to like combat all of this, right? But that was on and off. I mean, barring a few breakdowns, I seem to be handling it pretty well, and so I got through high school, managed to get through it, and when I got to college, university, that was I couldn't really skip classes anymore because you need to attend classes for university, and so that was really challenging. I was in and out of classes, and I had a lot of pressure on me to do well. And at that
Mm.
point, I became very exhausted. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And so I sort of, left school. I'd come back, I'd leave school, and so forth.
This is college now, right?
What university? Yeah,
University, right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I couldn't get through one semester,
Oh god.
and it was, so I would get through one semester, and then the second started, and I just couldn't get myself through it. And then so next semester would start, and I used to just come. There was one moment I came to campus. I sat down. I could see my professor talking, and it was just going through one ear and out the other. Not that I was bored, although I've had those experiences after as well. But I just remember being so overwhelmed with all of these thoughts in my mind that I just couldn't focus, and I was like, what am I doing here? And so, reluctantly, not that I wanted to, but reluctantly, I left school at the time. And it was hard after because, I was getting a lot of judgmental, um, statements from others like, you don't care about your future, you don't want to study, what are you going to do with your life?
Especially come
Which
from a
doesn't,
Pakistani background as
uh,
well in the family,
yeah,
right?
and it doesn't necessarily help, right? Um, but uh, but yeah, at the time I still didn't know, you know, I had gone through all of this depression and so forth. So that was a time I seriously considered suicide again, and I said, you know what, I have to do this now because I'm becoming a burden to others around me,
Mm.
and so I'm making their life harder anyways.
Mm.
And it's strange, like the rationale you come up with when you're thinking along those lines, it's just really scary in a way because you make something that's impermissible, suicide, seem halal. Because I was like, well, a lot of people lie and they cheat and they do all sorts of bad things.
Right.
I'm not going to harm anyone, like I'm just going to do this quietly and then go away.
That's interesting. So it's like you have like not just a psychological, but it's like, especially from a point of faith, a spiritual renegotiation. You're kind of renegotiating with yourself, saying, "Oh well, there's many harams or sins out there. It can't be that sinful. Put it into the scale of all sins, right? It's something I'm doing to myself. I'm not harming anyone else." You try to rationalize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and but yeah, I'll tell you what,
it's dangerous, right?
I could never get to a point of saying that it was fine because, like,
Okay.
there's a truth in our religion, in our faith, and I firmly believe that there's certain truths in our faith, certitudes that you can't get around them. One of them, for example, is that we have only one Creator, one God, and that there's no other God but Him.
Right.
And so that's just a certain known fact. And I really believe in the bottom of my heart that Allah would not put any challenges in someone's life that they would not be able to get through. And so I couldn't rationalize it as irrational as I became those days, that this was the right thing to do.
So you always had that thing, maybe your that voice in your head, that spirituality, that firm belief that you knew inherently that it was wrong, and that's what kind of held you back.
Yeah, that was all. It always came down to that. Like, if I wasn't Muslim, I honestly, I'd be dead a long time ago.
Right. Okay.
And that's not. I wouldn't say that in any form of I think judgmental way to someone who's not Muslim. I'm just talking about myself.
And you don't. And at the same time, you don't mean it in a way as if you're trying to proselytize your faith at the same time, right?
Yeah, it was just the God honest truth. Because
a lot of people of faith feel that.
I couldn't see a reason to live. Like, I felt like, well, my family would miss me, yes, and I don't want them to be hurt, but I'm also causing so much harm in their life. So the plus minus, maybe it's better I go away. Like, I came to that point, but then I'm like, no, this is wrong in our faith, and I don't want to meet Allah like this. And I'm like, after everything I've been through, if I meet Him like this, like that'd be such a disappointment. So I just couldn't get myself to that point. So it's funny how that works. I mean,
and it's interesting because you mentioned this was actually the second time you started pondering taking your life, right? It's
way
like the
more,
second time, right? But this is more
way
intense.
more serious. Yeah,
right. Because you're older now. You're an adult. You just started university.
21, 22, I believe. Yeah.
And you start university, right? And then you're basically after you dropped out from the course. It's quite powerful because just from talking to you, I feel like we're breaking a lot of not just the stereotypes, but it's very enlightening because there's so many misunderstandings in terms of the way people view depression and how people who think about suicide, it can be a recurring thing. You know what I mean? It doesn't just necessarily happen once.
Yeah.
It can be repetitive and it's a recurring kind of theme in someone's life. Sometimes for people it's for decades, And thank God, alhamdulillah, and the inner strength that they may have or whatever the circumstances, certain variables around them, that they don't do it, But for some people, they're constantly struggling, man. For years and years and years.
Yeah, and it becomes, I think, a little harder as you age because in some way, when you're young, you have a lot of dreams and you can kind of hang on to them. And you become a bit older and you start thinking a little bit more pragmatically. And sometimes it seems even harder, like, to have a dream that it's going to get better because you're like, well, this and that, and all sorts of things come up. And so I was really convinced to do it, but it was the same thought. I couldn't get myself to to go and commit to something like this. And so not with joy, not with relaxation, but with reluctance, I'd sort of just, okay, let me just go on with my life. And hopefully it'll get better, but it didn't. which was and I kind of just became a little bit more like calm, I guess, about it. And
what point was that again? What stage was that when you hoped that it was going to get better but it didn't? How old are you then?
So it's about early 20s, I'd say.
Okay.
And that was the second time I was pondering suicide, early 20s, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, and and so yeah, there was not like a lot of people asked me like, what was the moment that things got better
Yes.
for you?
Yes.
And I don't know. That's a disappointing answer. But I used to meditate at night. So before Fajr, last third of the night, I would just get up and just talk to Allah. And honestly, it would be like for like half an hour, sometimes 1 hour, and I would just talk to Him and and not in Arabic like making dua. I would just speak in a vernacular language like English, for example,
Hmm.
and I just speak to Him, and I just started to feel a lot better from there. That was like, I think that was the first thing I did. And I didn't do it intentionally, but I did it, and I started to feel a little bit better. And I started to get a little bit more ease, I suppose. And at the same time, ironically, for the first time in my life, I ran into a counselor at my college, and so when I spoke to her about it, that's when I started to understand a little bit more about mental health and depression. And she didn't give me an official diagnosis, but she was like, "I think you're going through depression," and I was like, "Okay, that makes some sense." So,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, I think it was a combination of like therapy,
Right.
also building, which I didn't know at the time, but building forms of resilience. And for me, it was meditation. It was making dua to Allah, and those things just made me a little bit more calm. Uh, I wasn't freaking out as often, and I became a lot more, I think, composed, because I would freak out quite frequently.
What do you mean by like freaking out? Like anxiety attacks?
Yeah, and like one small slip up, and that's it. Everything's gonna fall. I used to
Right.
think like that all the time, and so
Slip up
which
like,
makes it come again.
what do you mean by slip up?
Slip up like if I'm having a bad day, if you know something, for example, you know I couldn't get myself to pay attention in class. Small stuff, very small, quite insignificant to be honest. And it could be anything. I frankly I can't remember something specific, but it was something very small, and I would just like, okay, it's all everything's gonna fall, and so. But yeah, I stopped doing that, I think, and this was in around I'd say maybe 23, 24,
Okay.
and I was like sort of building that up, and then I started to do more. I got a lot more closer to my faith, and I was relying a lot more on my Creator, and very little on people around me, and I felt very strong. And at the time, I like I said, I had no job. I had really nothing in terms of like a skill set with university or career and so forth. And but I felt at peace. Like I was very very relaxed. And I felt like I could finally like live my life now. And so I ended up going back to university at that time.
How old were you then?
I was so this is when I wrote the article, probably 24, I believe.
So you wrote the
Uh,
article at that time and you were 24, right?
yeah, this was over several months, I'd
This is
say.
now about 5 years ago, right? Just over 5 years ago.
It's about 6 years ago, yeah,
Oh, 5, 6 years ago.
when I
Okay.
started writing the article. And then I was, what I was actually thinking was that I'm gonna go to university, I'm gonna graduate, and then I'm gonna like, share my story with everyone.
Okay.
And I thought like, well, why should I really do that? Like, why am I waiting to get to a certain stage and then tell the world, right? I wanted to just honestly share my story at a, frankly, very vulnerable time in terms of career, and in terms of like where I was personally. Like
Right.
I was when I had like nothing at that time with me, but I'm like, you know what, this is perfect. Like this is a time I want to share this because I want people to know because I know this myself. I realized like nothing you don't necessarily need something tangible like wealth, status, material, and so forth.
Hmm.
And I realized that at a very early age, I think, and I didn't want to write the article and publish it when I had all those things. I'm like, what, let me do it right now, because I felt a lot of contentment in my heart, and um, and that's really, I think, what people are trying to get, right? I don't think
Yeah.
people are really trying to get like they're trying to achieve all of these things. I think what people really hope for is to have peace of mind, to have contentment, and so forth.
That's
And I
deep.
think you can
Mm.
find all of those things without anything
Yeah, with all
material.
the accolades and the titles and the doctor or the you got the MA or the master, right? I mean, it's quite powerful actually that you mentioned that, because I think we unnecessarily put this pressure on ourselves that I'm going to share my story, that I'm going to really open up, I'm going to become great and brilliant when I've achieved A, B, and C, right? When I've got the
Hmm.
degree, or when I've got my doctorate, or when I've actually got that job. But then you kind of set these standards for yourself and saying, when I achieve those things, that's when I feel that I deserve to have a voice. But who says,
Hmm.
like yourself, you realize, well, you can have a voice right now. You know what I mean? You don't have to have these amazing feats and achievements. You can do it right now. And I think we kind of fool ourselves sometimes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's no question. I think, I mean, I ended up going back. I graduated from university, but
Excellent.
it,
Congratulations.
yeah, alhamdulillah. But honestly, it really makes zero difference in one way, because I think it's good. I mean, if you can afford an education, you have the privilege to it. You should try to do that, or a master's, or try to get a job that you like. I think
Right.
those are good goals to have. Um, but looking for something more, like looking for contentment, happiness, if so, from these sort of things, it's going to be a very disappointing feeling. And I think people inevitably realize that,
Right.
whether it's like a midlife crisis or something at very, very old age, that, these things are nice, but you're not going to get anything more out of them. So I pursue them now, but you know, I know in my heart that I'm not going to get.
But you're doing it from a different standpoint now, aren't you? You're doing it from a standpoint of you're feeling far more content. I know one of the things you mentioned, which kind of struck out when you were 11, 12 at the time, right? And you were in Islamic school, and no one actually asked you. Correct me if I'm wrong. No one really actually asked you, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" Your father obviously passed away. Your teachers
Mhm.
are your teachers at the Islamic school. Did they ever ask you, "Look, what's going on?"
I can't remember anyone asking me, to be honest, which is odd. I mean, uh, nothing close to it as well. Like,
Okay.
you know, the most I heard was, "Sorry about your dad," and that was about it.
The feeling of depression, loneliness, not wanting to be a burden. And that's another thing that struck out. The feeling of not wanting to be a burden. A lot of
Mhm.
people that I've spoken to, and articles that I read about people, suicide, for example, people who are falling into depression, is that feeling of I'm a burden on everyone around me, right? How would you advise people that are feeling this right now? What would you say to them, if someone is watching this video right now and actually genuinely feels that, because so many bad things have happened in their life, so many mistakes that they've made, they just can't get their act together, they just can't get it together, they feel, and they are constantly disappointing others around them, they're disappointing themselves. What advice would you give someone like that?
That's tough, but for me, it'd be really hard to advise someone going through that. But I guess I could answer it in one way, which would be, when I was when I uploaded the article and posted it onto YouTube and so forth. I thought that my life is going to be much better. I'm out of depression, and now I'm going to be normal. And I started, after that, I started to go through things I thought I would never go through, and I had some really, really down days as well. But like the only difference was like I wasn't thinking about suicide. I was just like, okay, like this is not easy, but let me handle it. And it was really hard, but it was really rewarding as well to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way I got through university, like God knows. I mean, I could write like a whole article just on that.
Yeah.
It was not easy. But alhamdulillah, I not only got through it, but I did really well. My marks were, they kept getting better the longer I stayed.
Excellent.
And I made a lot of, changes in my life, which wasn't easy. When you go from just trying to survive, it's really hard. And then when you have to, teach yourself how to live, which
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit different. And that took me a while to kind of get a grasp of. In terms of being a burden, I think sometimes I still feel that way, like I might be a burden to others because I'm having a down day and so forth. But to be honest, I mean, none of us are perfect. We become a burden to others around us, almost all the time. But the key thing is, I wrote this in the article, and it's said by the Prophet peace be upon him, who about 3, 4 days before his death said, "Let none of you die unless you have good expectations from Allah, unless you have good thoughts about Him." So don't tell yourself these negative stories. Like give yourself at least one chance to tell yourself something positive. Just give yourself that one chance, and
That's
your
interesting.
trials will make a little bit more sense. Like I look back to it, and I could negatively look at it in a way like I didn't really have much of a childhood and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
I could say, well, you know what? First of all, it's a long time ago, and the older you get, the less you care about what happened before. And then you start to think about what that brought out in you. Anytime you go through something, it's gonna bring out something from you.
Mm-hmm.
You go through a trial, you're gonna come out a different person, especially if you go through it in a patient way. So yeah,
Right.
I don't have to like what I went through. I
All
don't.
right.
But alhamdulillah, I think I'm happy with the changes I made in my life. For me, Allah's still very important to me. Faith is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of really good friends, and I don't know if I would have had them if I didn't go through all of these things. So I
So,
think in short, I would
mm,
just say, give yourself one chance, and think positive about Allah.
okay. Give yourself one chance and think positive about Allah. And again, if that's, for example, applying to, or for the non-Muslim viewer, for example,
Mhm.
it could be whatever they find faith in, I guess, right? Whatever they find strength in, which is in their God and their faith, or people have different things that they rely on. Um, but undeniably, there seems to be a connection between healing from mental health and depression and finding faith. And I can't give statistics, but I did read it in an article not long ago about a quite high proportion of people that part of their healing is actually turning to faith, whether it's becoming a practicing Muslim, a practicing Christian, whatever faith that they follow, right? And a lot of people do find solace and their healing in following a religion or faith. I mean, I've heard you quite a few times now mention the importance of your Creator, of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala in your life. The moment where, well, because you were in a religious household, so constantly you were surrounded by that, to the time where, you knew from quite a young age actually, which is quite profound, that you didn't want to meet Allah when you first pondered about suicide, and then you convinced yourself, but I don't want to meet Allah like this. You know, I mean, for a lot of people, that's very profound. A lot of young kids don't think like that. You know, but then you mentioned the relapse. You didn't use the word, but it sounded like a relapse, right? Is it in your mid 20s or after you started your studies again? You have your
Mhm.
highs and your lows. You mentioned the word lows. You said I had lows.
Yeah.
Again, this is something we constantly hear, and I read about the highs and lows and depression, right?
Mhm.
And you have your low days.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is just starting off. If you have depression, people often speak about how they have very little energy, willpower to do something. That's probably the hardest stage, to be honest. But when I got through it and I was having all of these challenges come my way, you've got to build like a network of
Yeah.
support around you.
Okay.
Um, if it's therapy, but you start to, you can build up different
Yeah.
resilient skills to
Yeah.
get through it. And you do become a lot stronger.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's you take a step at a time.
Yeah.
Uh, for some people, like, their step is just, I'm gonna get out of bed and I'm gonna go outside for a walk, and that's good. Like,
Right.
that's awesome. For others, it's like, I'm gonna go talk to a stranger today,
Hmm.
to battle social anxiety. And for others, it's like, I'm gonna go and study university and try to graduate. So, but you can build on these skills, that if you keep a growth mindset and, tell yourself that I'm not there, but I'm not there yet.
Hmm.
And you can always build on those things. But
Okay.
again, it's you try not to overburden yourself. That's for
So yeah,
sure.
I like the way you put that, a growth mindset. So it's the idea of you're always trying to grow and better yourself, even with the littlest of things. So Muhammad, again, remind us, what was that turning point again where you felt that you started to, make that positive change?
Yeah, I think if I had to think about it, and I unintentionally came to it, it was the first time I started waking up for the tahajjud. I would sometimes pray just one or two rak'ahs of nawafil, which was it. I didn't really pray long, but I would sit down and just talk to Allah for like half an hour. It started as 5 minutes, then it became 10, then half an hour, then an hour. And this is a time that, like, literally, these were the days where I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I'd wake up in the morning, sometimes, and I'm like, what can I do today? And I would just stay lying down for like an hour or two. So I had very, very little willpower.
Hmm.
And so going to university and completing a degree was just, out of my realm. So, but this is the time I would wake up for prayer. Someone once asked me, like, can you still pray when you're going through depression? And I think you absolutely can. Like,
That's interesting.
uh,
That's a valid question, right?
yeah, it's a very good question. But I think, deep down we do have that ability to do it. And so I was still able to maintain my prayers in the middle of it, alhamdulillah.
Okay.
And so when I get up for Fajr, a little bit before that, I would just, wake up, and yeah, I just accidentally came upon it. I would just talk to Allah, and those were long conversations. And honestly, like, I could, not to sound like so preachy, but that was like, those moments are probably the best of my entire life. Better than when I graduated, better
Mm.
than anything I can think of. I just felt so much peace in my heart, and I really felt like you know, yeah, I can get up tomorrow and stuff. And so,
You actually looked forward to getting up the next morning.
uh, maybe not getting up, but waiting for the night.
All right, all right.
So,
It's all in
uh,
stages. Okay.
but it got better and stuff over time.
That's interesting because you see, I was not in the impression that you used to regularly pray. I know you said you went to Islamic school. You had a very Islamic upbringing in terms of your household, but I didn't really realize whether you were constantly on your five daily prayers. Was that something that you were always constantly on then?
High school, not necessarily,
Okay,
but as just, like, my stress started to increase in high school, I started praying regularly,
okay.
and then it became very constant. It just became part of my routine.
Did that
Uh,
help you? Do you think then the
oh,
prayers?
100%, man. I don't know where I'd be, because like, prayer is always going to shape your entire day. If you're thinking about what I need to do, ideally
Right.
prayer should guide it. If I'm going to do this event or that event, I'm going to pray here, I'm going to pray there. And without realizing it, you're forcing a routine into your life,
Excellent. Yes.
and routine is really important, especially when you have
Excellent.
anxiety and depression.
A lot of therapists
Um,
speak about that, right? A lot of them do.
yeah.
Like a lot I know
So
Jordan Peterson, which is from your ends, from Canada, right? I've watched a
yeah,
few of his
Toronto
videos.
actually.
Toronto, your University of Toronto, right? And
Yeah.
he speaks a lot about routine as well, and having some form of routine, having a life, and doing things. So the prayers kind of do
It
they?
does force a routine, yeah. And even I think someone who's who's not Muslim, they would kind of agree with that. Like it does force routine, and it really really helped me.
Well, in terms of the millennials today, and even if not just the millennials, but the age that we're in, 2018 as well, we're hearing a lot. We've been hearing it since the new millennium. This thing about meditation. So okay, let's not call it prayers. Let's not call it spirituality. Let's just replace the word with something that's a bit more palatable and something that we can swallow a bit better. Meditation. So for some people, it's meditation, which is fine. That's a beautiful thing, and I think we should all meditate. And a lot of people say, "Well, it's the same thing." Well, not necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know too much of the science behind it, but for anyone who's not Muslim, I mean, there's meditation certainly isn't the only way. There's many different things that can help in someone's well-being. But I think really what I can do when I share my story is just be very authentic about it. And for me, it was really, the getting up before Fajr, which helped. And anything else would just be a lie. So for me, that helped. I don't know if that's the only way. I think there's a lot of ways to get better as well.
Well, I mean, it's funny because, we hear these things, from a Muslim community as well. And, one of the things I try to tackle in my poem is about the Imams and the advice that they might give, in my poem about suicidal Muslims, about, I went to my local Imam, to him to read a few pages of the Holy Quran, made dua to Allah for guidance and Iman. But essentially, that is for people that are on that spiritual Islamic path. For them, that is the answer. But then it's the way that you give the advice, I guess, because you admit it yourself. It was many things, right? It was also the timing of when you met that counselor. Is that when you just dropped out of university? You met the counselor. Is that when you were in university initially, just before you dropped out?
I dropped out of school 4 times.
Okay.
And that was at college, I believe. She, very, very kind woman. That was the first time I sort of came on to therapy by accident.
Mental health, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was like obviously huge help for me.
Yes, because I wanted to speak about therapy in your life at that time then.
Come again?
So I wanted to touch upon that. Did you actually constantly seek therapy from that time?
I remember she told me, I want you to seek this. I want you to try to get therapy, when you do go back to university. And I was like, okay, I'll keep an open mind to it. And so I did. I tried to ignore it, but I ended up, going back. I think it just helps to have someone who knows about the topic, and that can, understand a little bit better what you're going through. The quick note on the Imam part is, I think this is where so many people get it wrong, is giving someone the right answer isn't necessarily what you need to do all the time. Like, it's very easy. Like, you can step in and tell someone what to do. But I think a lot of people need to be heard. They need to be listened to. And they need to know someone actually genuinely cares. Like, it's not a wrong thing to tell someone, like, you should pray to Allah and He will help you. Because that's factually true. We know that in our faith. But to tell them that without listening to them and without actually hearing what they're going through, it might just fall on deaf ears. So, which is unfortunate because you're telling something that's accurate, but it's just unfortunate when you tell someone the right thing, but it comes across in an ineffective manner. So, pray to Allah and He will help you, or go back to school and finish your degree, which is something I used to hear. And telling them something that's actually correct. It's,
it's ironic, isn't it, though? It's ironic because what you just said was so ironic. I mean, the paradox in it, which is telling people the right thing is not always the right thing. I mean, that's just it's counterintuitive, right? But it's genius.
It's odd, but
it's odd, but it's genius because it's so true.
I think people a lot of them want to be heard, like, and it doesn't take a counselor to necessarily do that. You can just literally just don't talk, just listen. A lot of people want to be heard, and when they don't have a chance to do that, it's it feels like unsolicited advice just coming at them, and it's hard to take that seriously then. So yeah, I think that's something that gets missed. I think we often think about, let me just help this person, but you can do that by just listening to them, letting them know that they were heard. It's rare that you can say something that's going to actually help someone feel better, to be honest. But what might help them feel better is if they connect with you and so forth.
That's so deep. You know what? And I want that to be one of the main takeaways of today's interview and really, really informative and educational chat. But yeah, that just that one takeaway, man, just that one thing there in terms of if you know someone that's going through depression and has serious mental health issues and that melancholy and sadness, that is such a profound piece of advice in how to interact and just deal with them. You don't have to give them the lecture. You don't have to give them the, oh, you know what, let me just give you some bite-sized golden nuggets. And trust me, it's so powerful, the advice I'm going to give you. Listening itself is powerful. And when you then added that the state of mind that you're in, no matter what I say to you, for example, it's not necessarily going to help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's about listening. But impression I get that from a very young age when you started going through this, correct me if I'm wrong, till the time that you met the counsellor in your early 20s when you were dropping out of college again, yeah? You didn't really talk to a lot of people about this, did you?
I not at all. No.
Not anyone.
I didn't know what was really wrong. For example, I had lost my dad. I had grown up being bullied, but I just thought that's life. Like I have to be stronger, So and people used to tell me that, like, just be stronger, which again is the right thing to do. Actually, you want to be strong, but how do you like implement that? So, but I would say one thing: I never felt like I was really heard, like anyone seriously listened. And or if they did, I don't, it wasn't necessarily helpful in that sense. But I finally met someone who, like the counselor who obviously trained, and she listened to me, and the feedback she provided was very not, non-judgmental and so forth, and it just felt nice to be heard. But I think it's unfortunate in one way, like it shouldn't just take a counselor and a psychotherapist to do that. Like these are skills that all of us should and can develop.
I mean, when you met that lady, if you want to mention her name, you can. It's up to you. But I'm sure you feel indebted towards her as well. That she had the time at least she took out the time to advise you and to say, you know what, seek therapy. Do you feel very grateful? Are you still in contact with her?
I'm not in contact, but I do plan to send her a thank you note.
Mm-hmm.
I actually can't remember her name. I think it's Siobhan.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, she was
well done, Siobhan. Well done.
Yeah.
yeah, great.
But really, the first person that I met who was a trained counselor and that encouraged me, as she strongly advised me, I should add, to get therapy and so forth. And it's not always helpful. Like I've walked out of some sessions where I'm like, what's the point of talking?
Yeah.
But other times it's been it's been nice. But I feel like, okay, let me develop this new resilient skill that I can use, and it comes in handy. Like you can use that when you're going through difficult challenges and so forth.
So when Siobhan told you at that time, the counselor, that you need to seek therapy, did you act on that immediately, right away?
No.
How long did it take you then?
I'd say maybe a year or so.
How old
or maybe
were you then?
longer.
How old? About 23?
Actually, no, let me go back. It took me 3-4 years, I believe. She told me when I was around 22, and I probably saw counselor again at 26, I believe.
Is that when you just rejoined and re-enrolled
Yes.
to your English and city planning course?
Yeah, I was in college that time. I went to University of Toronto after, but I did seek some help at college at that time, and then later on at the University of Toronto.
See, a lot of this stuff is timing, isn't it, as well? Like the saying in the proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So you've got to be ready for this yourself, right? And I guess all these things are on in your story, on your journey, these are like milestones that you had to go through, and they're triggers. So you have triggers in a negative sense and connotation, but you have triggers also for your revival and your redemption, if you like. You know what I mean? I mean, are you still since you started that therapy, are you still actively seeking therapy?
Um, well, like here and there, I don't constantly do it.
Hmm.
Although I think it's good, it's more so like I still go through a lot of like ups and downs even right now.
No, I can imagine.
Um,
Yeah.
and what's ironic is I was going through a really hard day, or like I would say like a whole week, and that's when I got your email about wanting to do an interview like this.
Okay.
And I know it's funny, and I opened it up. I'm like, oh,
Subhanallah.
here, I get a chance to like maybe help someone else out, Muslim, non-Muslim. I know I speak a lot about how faith has helped me, but
Hmm.
it's not to sound, in a form of preacher to a non-Muslim or an
Of course.
atheist and so forth.
Of course.
It's just it's me being very honest about
Your
my
own
own
journey.
recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
And I think most people respect that. They understand it as well. But I thought, hey, here's a chance I can, maybe be of help to someone.
Yeah.
When I shared, like a Muslim brother's story with suicide, I did that intentionally only because I think there's just very little in our community. We sort of brush this aside and we
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it and so forth.
Mm.
And so I wanted to just sort of, you know, I like I think being a progressive thinker is good, and I like doing that. Just think outside the box and so forth.
Hmm.
And that's what I wanted to do initially.
It's quite pleasing to hear that. Okay, whilst you were going through that difficult week, as we do, right?
Hmm.
You received the email from me, so it's I'm trying to reach out to you because I feel that maybe we can learn so much from you at the same time. Um, and we've spoken so much actually. One thing I want to touch upon, which you just mentioned, is about mental health in the Muslim community itself. What has your experience been in terms of our shuyukh, our ulama, our sheikhs, for example? Um, do you think there's a big problem? Is it? I mean, I mentioned the poem. It's a taboo. Do our imams need to be trained in this? Do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't know too much about like England, for example, so
Hmm.
I could speak more about GTA, the Toronto region. I think first of all, it's improved a lot, so that's a positive thing to look at. When I was going through school, I thought depression and anxiety were like for well, I thought were like crazy people.
Mm.
This is when I was in high school, and I think things have changed a lot, not only in the Muslim community, but in the larger community in general. And I think people are beginning to realize that imams, they can be very trained in fiqh, for example, like jurisprudence of faith, but counseling, psychotherapy, those are completely different fields. And you could be a very good imam, but you may not be the best counselor. And that's not necessarily like to take a shot at imam. It's just a realization of, the complexity of the world we live in. So I think more people are more aware of that now, and that's the biggest change I've seen in terms of imams receiving training. I think everyone should receive some sort of training
Mm.
because it's like when I didn't go to a therapist, I was calling up a friend, and I was calling up someone I knew, and I think if I was to take a guess, I don't think most people will go and just seek therapy right away. They
Hmm.
might turn to their buddy, they might turn to their friend,
Hmm.
their coworker, and so forth. And so I think ideally, like we should have everyone being a little bit more, uh, you know, um, not sympathetic, but empathetic, like where you can,
Empathetic. Mm.
yeah, try to relate to others and so forth. But yeah, imams, because they're in a position of leadership, they definitely need to have some minimum skill of counseling, and if they're not sure how to do it, they should just listen first.
Just listen, right? Listening is a great tool, man. I
Mhm.
know, subhanallah. I mean, yeah, I mean, look, and it's the case, right? I mean, in terms of, religiously and Islamically, the idea of ad-dinu nasiha, The deen is nasiha. The deen, the faith is advice, sincere, genuine advice. But yeah, the trends are changing, and I hope that from this episode and this really informative discussion, that people really benefit from this. Muslims, non-Muslims,
I
everyone.
hope.
I hope, and so do I, and especially in the community, the Muslim community, in terms of the imams, because for example, in churches, it's a big thing here in the UK as well. Mental health and whatnot, and therapy, and speaking about these things. And we're living in a day, and we're living in an age where I think we're so obsessed with what's going on in here with ourselves, and there's a great feeling of, I think, like genuine like disappointment with ourselves. We can't figure out what we want to do. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? We feel aimless. So my uncle, when we were young, he used to use this term, "I was a drifter." You're just drifting away by the wind, or wherever the wind blows, it takes you, right? But you can feel that in men, especially when you go through, depression. You can feel where am I? What? So when you spoke about just walking through the streets, like not really knowing, without a purpose. Last few things I want to actually, when we're kids, we hear these sayings: "Every cloud has a silver lining." What if it doesn't kill you, it only makes you stronger. So now, what do these sayings mean to you now, when you hear them? Every cloud has a silver lining, for example.
I personally hate it.
Oh, bad
Because
example, man.
no, no, I
Sorry.
mean, like no, it's not that. I just, because it never used to make sense to me, and I've always been a little bit more of a literal person. So, I felt like these were like those nice statements, but I couldn't really get anything out of them. But, yeah, I haven't been. I'm not the best with motivational quotes, I'd
Motivational.
say.
All right. Another thing, did you get into a phase where you were watching motivational videos?
Um, I don't think I did. No.
Okay.
I mean, they're helpful. Like, there's no question.
Hmm.
I just felt I didn't feel like I could get as much out of them. I was always very analytical and classic overthinker, and so what helped me was like breaking things down and so forth. Um, and I didn't feel like there was much fruit in like a nice little saying, for example.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's deep. That's deep. Um, would you say that you're now at a stage where you can comfortably say that I'm not, I'm not, I'm not suffering from depression. I've come out of it. I've kind of triumphed, and I can now, I can confidently say that I'm in a much, much better place.
Yeah, it's a continuum. Like what I learned is that you have to constantly, work on yourself. It's kind of like staying healthy. You can't just eat a healthy meal one day and then, expect to be healthy for like the next month. You've got
Hmm.
to constantly eat healthy to stay healthy. With depression, I I, I get some really down days, but I always have willpower, more or less. I mean, there's still days like even right now where I'm like I can't do it, and I'll just take a day off and I'll just try to rest if I can afford to do so. Um, but yeah, I mean they still come. But I think one thing I've learned, and it's exhausting. I mean, it's because it really wears you out. But um, you should get into a habit of consistently, working on something,
Hmm.
uh, like eating healthy, for example, or exercising. Following a routine with prayer, for example. But you should be doing it because eventually, you might burn out and then it might get really hard. And so it's a bit disappointing. I can imagine someone who's really depressed thinking like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to keep doing this," right? Um, I mean that I could understand, but I wouldn't want someone to live in with the thought that when it gets better, it's gonna stay better. You
Hmm.
just have to constantly work at it.
Hmm.
But you build it into your routine and it becomes second nature.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, because I think that's a misunderstanding and a misconception people have that. Okay, well, you're out of depression now. You're not suffering from it, so you must be absolutely fine. Your life must be great. And you got the Instagram picture, you just happily being there, smiling with your family, and my life's just turned around. But again, yes, there's definitely an element of that. You're in a much better place, which is something that we can celebrate. But every day is a struggle, right? Still, and you have your moments. You might have your weeks. You might have whatever, where you have to then remind yourself, okay, it's one of those days, right? It's one of those days.
I think what it is like connecting with people around you. Whether it's building friends. There's a saying by the cousin of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Ibn Abbas,
Sorry,
who said that none of you will be able to experience true faith unless you don't build relationship for Allah's sake, which is basically a fancy way of saying, build friendships, but be sincere in those friendships. Don't just try to, I'm going to be friends with this person so they can help you land a job or something.
Mm-hmm.
You're sincere friends with them. You just care about them. And this was a saying of Ibn Abbas. And I mean, notice that how amazing that is because, I've had, I think the best fortune I have in my life is, obviously my sister is my mom, but the friends I've made, and the coworkers I have, people in my support network, for example, which is people I've had a chance to work with, study with,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's you don't necessarily like you're not necessarily friends with everyone, but the like some of the coworkers I have, for example, we're not necessarily friends. We don't hang out, but I've been so fortunate to have them in my life, just as a form of people I could trust,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that you have that and so forth. It's a really good
Excellent,
feeling, and
excellent.
alhamdulillah, yeah.
And did you feel that you started to connect more with people, especially after, you wrote that article and then with a YouTube video about walking away from suicide, and when you started your degree again, is that when you felt that you started to connect with people and speaking to more people openly about these things to friends and stuff?
Yeah, I think I became just more authentic. I'm like, enough of this mask. I'm just gonna be myself. And the world is what you give to it. I've still run into people who judge me, and I wouldn't want to be friends with, but alhamdulillah, because I don't need that in my life. Uh, so the fortune is like, being myself, I have met others. And they feel like genuine friendships, even if it's like, meeting them for like 2, 3 times, right? Uh, so alhamdulillah, I think just, yeah, being true to myself, being, just honest and so forth, it's helped me build friends because I feel it's really been uh, sort of a, open-ended endeavor.
Excellent. Now, I can, I've never met you. This is the first time I've seen you on the screen and
Yeah.
spoken to you via Skype. You seem like a very genuine person, a genuine brother, mashallah.
I think we'd definitely be friends if I was in
Yeah,
England.
man. Yeah,
You're just too
most
far though,
we're
dude.
kind of fun. No, I'll definitely make a trip to Toronto. I've got like family in
Inshallah.
Ottawa. I've been to Ottawa twice.
Okay.
I've been to Halifax as well.
Okay. It's very
No,
far, but
Nova
okay.
Scotia. Yeah, it's a very different place. First of all, I'd like to thank you for sharing your story. If there's anything else you'd like to say, last few words for people that are watching, possibly as a reminder, as advice, what would you say to them?
For putting me on the spot.
Well, two
I,
takeaways
I,
I've got. Two takeaways I've got from this before you answer that is it's not always right to say the right thing. That was brilliant. And you said something not long ago about the world is what you give to it or something, right?
yeah, if you're honest with others, I think people return that honesty.
Hmm.
If uh, you talk to people only because you need to, you'll often run into people who probably do the same thing, right?
Positively, yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that's true, and I've experienced that as well.
Okay.
In terms of advice to anyone, honestly, I would just say, you know, uh, man, that's tough. because I don't know what I could really say to help someone feel better.
Hmm.
But I just think that it's unfortunate, but there's just such little support for people. And I've always really connected with, quote unquote, like silent voices. It's whether it's a Muslim sister, Muslim brother, non-Muslim, doesn't matter. But people who are, really often ignored, overlooked, not spoken to, and so forth. I've always connected with them a lot. And so I don't know if I'd have, any advice, but I just want to say, like, I always keep, those people on my du'as. Um, and, uh, and yeah, it's whether it's a brother or sister, I think it's really unfortunate. I don't feel that in our Muslim community we support each other as much as we should.
Hmm.
And it really disappoints me because, we should be doing that.
Yeah.
So I think my only message would be that, for all my brothers, my sisters, in faith and those outside, that, you have me as a person who really, really genuinely cares about you guys. And you guys are in my prayers, even though I haven't met any of you, or maybe I've met some of you. And that's the only thing I'd say. I don't know if I would really have any advice.
That was a positive, and it was a nice positive ending. And just the mere fact that you think about people, you think about whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, anyone that's going through this, that they're in your thoughts. That itself is a beautiful thing. If people want to connect with you, Muhammad, yeah, how can they find you? So your YouTube channel is named after yourself, Mohammad Zafar, yeah.
Yeah, I not as active as I used to be,
Okay, cool.
but yeah, it's still there. I
Mohammad
can
Zafar.
leave.
How do you spell that for those that might want to look you up quickly?
Sure. It's
Hmm.
Mohammad, and then Zafar.
And also, is that the same name you're using on? Are you on Twitter, Instagram,
Yeah, so
Facebook?
on Twitter, Twitter's good. It's Mohammad Zafar YT, so YouTube
Okay.
on Twitter,
Hmm.
and Facebook is just Mohammad Zafar YouTube channel.
Great. The YouTube channel mainly I've checked out recently. You've got a lot of anashid, a lot of Islamic songs in Arabic in
Yeah,
particular. What's that about?
yeah, no, I used to love listening to the nasheeds from a young age,
Yeah.
and so I tried to do my best to like upload non-musical nasheeds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's still something
Is that something that helps you feel as well?
it's nice. I mean, like I think it's a fairly big channel. It's become pretty big,
Mm.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah, you got a lot of
I,
followers, definitely. I mean, at least what 170,000 or something. You got quite a
yeah,
lot.
it's a lot of people like
I've
nasheeds,
got
so
201 followers, but that's it. Yeah, that's all
there's a
good.
lot. There's a large market for nasheeds, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
happy
yeah,
to
yeah,
happy
exactly.
to
Yeah,
step
yeah,
in and
exactly.
just upload
It's
for
not a
people
large
to
market for
listen to.
someone like me, but yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they're good. They're very, very cool, man. So I noticed that's a big part of your content. So yeah, that was deep. That was interesting. But yeah, again, thanks again, my brother. Allah yubarak feek. Allah bless you. And your journey has been very, very. It's been tough, but it's been inspiring to hear how you've turned things around. It's really helped me understand things about myself. I've not spoken a lot about my own issues with depression and stuff. I didn't want to really go into that too much because I felt this is about you. But yeah, I mean, I wrote my poem actually about suicidal Muslims, which a lot of people are now watching and listening to. I actually wrote that and performed that after I read your article and listen to your talk on your channel. So maybe I think in a way that's definitely you have affected me in a positive way. And inshallah, I just pray that those that do have any problems that we will go through. Um, I'm going to say something you hate. Every cloud has a silver lining. I know you're not into your problems, yeah, but really, every cloud really does have a silver lining. It's
Sure.
not over till it's over, And I think we need to, correct me if I'm wrong from my own experience now. I feel that we need to believe and just trust in the process. And I do think it really has to get worse before it gets better. And from an Islamic point, you mentioned the verses, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not overburden a soul more than it can bear. I think that's important for a lot of us to understand that, you know, we can, whatever comes our way, we can get through it somehow. We can get through it somehow, and everyone's journey and everyone's calamity or trial is different. You know, what you went through, I might not have been able to take, right? And from my tests and my trials, you might not take. You know, it's really, it's custom made to all of us, right? And for you to come out and share that, I really appreciate that. Allah bless you, keeps you strong. Congratulations again on your graduation, Mr. English City Planner, right? Double major. Yeah, I wish you all the best, and hopefully we can stay connected and we'll meet up one day.
Inshallah.
You know? But again, Mohammad Zafar, everyone, please listen to this episode with this lovely, beautiful brother, Mohammad Zafar from Toronto, Canada. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. It's been educational for me. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, share this with as many people as you can, and you'll be hearing more of this hopefully very soon. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Go Check TV. Stay blessed. Peace.